to the Import Report, the show in which we look at relatively decent games we Americans never got. The first game for today is Mobile Suit Z Gundam Hot Scramble. Now, I've never watched an episode of Gundam in my life, and I don't plan on it, so keep that in mind. Does that stop me from liking the game? Absolutely not. This game is great! But first, some history. This game was released in 1986 in Japan, and was published by Bandai and developed by the company Game Studio. Talk about a terrible name. They didn't really develop anything you would know. The game greets you with a large wall of text that only a solid 3 people care about. It then spends 2 minutes of your time showing you a bunch of sprites of other robots. This is one of the longest intros on a Famicom game that is completely unnecessary. Though, 98% of the time, you just mash start. Right off the bat, this game is certainly graphically impressive, and gives off some 3D World Runner vibes. You have to fire at incoming robots and shoot down their bullets. These physics feel kind of wacky on these Earth segments, because you can only move so far up or down. And if you let go, it recenters. In later Earth segments, some mobile suits just pop out of nowhere and shoot you without any time to react. Thankfully, this doesn't last long, as the next segment takes place in space and has even better controls. It is easier to get hit in the space segments, though. After you shoot even more robots, you infiltrate a ship. Some ships you have to shoot down before entering, which is almost impossible to do without taking a hit. The game switches genres and becomes a 2D side-scrolling dungeon crawler sort of thing. These levels are my favorite in the whole game. I don't believe they're randomly generated, but they never get old. The goal in these levels is to make it to the end and destroy this thing. I can't really tell what it is. Along the way, you guessed it, more killer robots. You can also find power-ups, including the power rifle, the power shield, and randomly generated health. The gun upgrade lets your bullets pass through bots, and the shield temporarily protects you from damage. Pretty simple stuff, but sometimes when I pick up a health rectangle, I either heal half a point or get a max recovery. In these segments, if you hold the jump button, you can transform into a wave rider and fly faster. You can't stop though and can't change fire directions, and you are more vulnerable to damage. After you complete the maze, you face a giant reactor thing. The weak point is obvious, and once you shoot it, it fires in multiple directions. At first, it's really hard to avoid the bullets, but after playing a couple times, you make the habit of the direction combination, and they become easy to avoid. And in the later levels, there are some platforms that make it even easier to dodge the bullets, requiring you to only jump sometimes. The game has 16 unique levels, which change up the dungeons a little bit and add harder robots. And the first-person shooter segments just add more enemies. After you beat level 16, the credits show with some unidentified child chasing a bouncing ball. Even though this game sounds like something I'd order for breakfast, it's one of my favorite Famicom games. The first-person segments are really fun and impressive for the console. The 2D section is addicting and is all around an original Famicom game. There are actually 2 versions, the one I reviewed and the extremely rare Director's Cut. That game is an entirely first-person shooter and is one of the rarest games of all time. Only 1,000 were made. On the topic of rare, there's actually a GBA port for the Famicom miniseries. Well, not really. If you bought Mobile Suit Gundam, Warriors of Locust, for the Japanese GameCube, you could enter a contest to win one of these gems. This time, only 2,000 were made, making it one of the rarest GBA games. The next game for today is Nuts and Milk by Hudson Soft. This was the first ever third-party game to be released on a Nintendo console. Now, if it wasn't for this, we probably wouldn't have such classics like Redneck Jamboree and Touch Deek. So yeah, this game was originally released on a couple of Japanese computers before being ported to the Famicom the following year. The game's menu looks like a copy and paste from all Nintendo arcade ports. In fact, this whole game doesn't even feel third-party. Hudson really outdid themselves by capturing the Nintendo arcade aesthetic. From a distance, the card even looks like it could be a Famicom Pulse title, specifically Donkey Kong Jr. Math, and it even has a simple story. You play as Milk, a blob-like thing, and once you've collected all the fruit, you try not to get murdered by nuts. And then you get to meet your girlfriend named Yogurt. On many levels, there are multiple nuts. Are they clones or are they a species? That doesn't really matter though. This game is pure arcade fun. There are 50 unique levels and are all crafted quite nicely. I'm not going to cover all of them, but I'll show a few more noteworthy ones. Round 6 says nuts, and round 7 says milk to remind you of what game you're playing. Level 9 has this tricky spring segment and is the only real difficulty spike in the game. There are 2 springs and timing on those is really tight. And then, after that, you must climb this staircase-like structure that is really easy to get stuck on. Maybe the devs thought of this level as an ending point of the easy stages, because from this point onward, the stages get a lot more challenging, but not too challenging. Round 14 says Kiku, which means listen in Japanese. But why should I be listening? Level 24 is interesting because if you miss these jumps, you don't fall into a pit. You have to run into one of the many nuts to end it yourself, making the death stick with you more. That's brutal. There's also an array of bonus stages. Pretty standard, but they literally just control-seed the fireballs from Mario Bros. But let's say you played all the levels multiple times and need something fresh. There's actually a level editor where you can make your own custom nuts and milk stages! I made Donkey Kong and the game said no. No, seriously. Every time I tried to make something, I always got a round error. And it's not just an emulation problem because I painstakingly recreated my stages on my Famicom and still got the same problem. I don't believe I have a bootleg cart because I got this game from the Pink Gorilla. But I'm not really a level editor guy myself, so I'm not that disappointed. So overall, this game is really good. It manages to pull off the inspired by aesthetic well, and doesn't feel like a Donkey Kong ripoff, but rather an official Nintendo game. I really don't have too much to say about this one, it's just a generally good Famicom game. In the next episode of the Import Report, we will take a look at a couple of Mario SNES games we never got. But for now, have a good night.